Peace, blessings, and black love. This is Amaja Owetu coming to you black at it again. In this episode, this is another example of classic conditioning. Classic conditioning being how you, the listening audience, members of today's world, are conditioned to think, act, feel, respond to certain environment conditions that for the most part are not the way you would yourself handle those conditions. So when you are a child of a person, they're going to teach you how. I'm being vague on purpose so we don't mince words. The pattern is always what I'm speaking about. Behavioral pattern and talking points. I don't like really itemizing or categorizing names or labeling things because people get turned off with the labels. People get turned off with the words. But they're not aware that it implies or suggests or confers the same thing. This is why I read to you guys synonyms and antonyms, homophones, and antonyms, so that you will be aware that they're pretty much the same thing. They just change their words either generationally, they change their word decadely, they change their word in social environmentally. It's the same behavioral pattern or thought process. It just changes the word depending on the environment, situation, or sentence structure you use or are in. So I don't want to always be overly explicit, overly complicated, overly identifying or specific. I said specific, but I don't want to be overdoing it so that you don't get confused. My job is to be as simple and as vague 5th grade level as possible. Classic conditioning is what I'm speaking of. And you, people that are living today, you are being conditioned to think, act, feel, react to certain situations and environments, mainly because the way your mama and your daddy taught you how to respond. Again, we are not from the Jim Crow era. We're 20 years after the Jim Crow era. Many of us are 20 years after the Jim Crow era. Some of us are 10 years after the Jim Crow era. But you have to understand, we did not grow up in the Jim Crow era. Our grandparents, our parents did, but we did not. So then why do we have such fear associated to white people or the system as compared to our parents and or grandparents? Well, if we haven't had water hoses poured on us, shot on us, if we haven't had fire bombings, if we haven't had crosses burned in the street, what's keeping us afraid to fight? What's keeping us afraid to compete? What's keeping us afraid to acknowledge the simple truth? Well, my job is to show you, and many other people's job is to show you why you can't move past your phobia. And again, it's classic conditioning. So there are a lot of things. Please understand, I'm not trying to tell you it's only one thing or 3 things. I'm explaining to you there are a lot of reasons why we, Black America, we're not pushing back. There's a lot of reasons why we're not pushing back. But I need you to focus on being able to hear why you're not pushing back. Then maybe within the video or maybe by watching other people's videos, you can develop the courage or the training to push back. I do not want anybody running out there pushing back in the street. I don't think you guys are built for that. So I would not teach you guys that. Those that are built for that, I don't have to teach them that. Those that are built for that, I don't have to convince them of that. Those that are built for that, they know what to do. Those that are not built for that, I don't want you to go out there and assume the position knowing that ain't your lane. There's other ways to push back. You can push back by marrying within your race. You can push back by how you manage your finances. You can push back by the education you give your children and grandchildren, nieces and nephews. You can push back by your dietary supplement. You can push back by what you eat, what you do not eat. You can push back by your fashion sense. You can push back by the cars you wear, how you work on your car. So there's many ways to push back. So you don't always have to push back in the middle of the street. You can find another way. And the whole purpose of these videos is to show you how to do it without actually doing it directly. You can be incognito, you can be secretive, but as long as you're pushing back, as long as you're buying the books, as long as when you do the politics, are you doing the politics not only for your best interest, are you also doing your politics for future generations? Are you also making sure that school board PTAs and PTA meetings and your home associations, whatever, it depends on where you living at, because I don't live in an environment where I have to talk to anybody about homeowners, which is basically about curb appeal. So when you enter that neighborhood, they want it to look pristine and clean. I don't live in that neighborhood. I don't live in that environment, so I don't have to answer to anyone. However, the city does have a city ordinance, and I must comply to the city ordinance. I must keep my house under a certain condition. I must have rails on the steps. I must have my gutters clean. When my gutters drain down, they must drain down to the street. So I have to have downspouts. There are certain things that I have to do in order to comply. But the difference between the city ordinance and the homeowners association, those are two different, I would say, requirements. This one is probably, city ordinance is probably requiring, let's just give me a number, 25 items, or 10 items, whereas the homeowners association may require a little bit more items that when you look at it, it's not really that important. However, it brings down the value of everybody's house. So they're a little bit more picky in the homeowners association as compared to the city ordinance. So I do have to comply. I'm not telling you not to comply. I don't want you to get lost in the sauce as I explain systems. Classic conditioning is you have been conditioned by your parents not to buck the system. I'm trying to get you to understand, even though you may disagree with whatever word I use, whatever word I input in the sentence, you may disagree with the word, but you cannot disagree with the behavior. You're not fighting back. You're supposed to fight for jobs. That's male and female. And I'm a sidebar on this introduction. I need you guys to understand it. We are all trying to eat off the same plate. ALL. That's every race, every nationality, every sex, every handicap, every minority. We are all trying to eat off the same plate. So when you get one race of people where the male and the female are actually competing and fighting over the exact same portion of scraps, you're going to have content, and you're going to have anguish, you're going to have jealousy, because we're all fighting for portions off the same plate. So if you, black female, goes down there and applies for the warehouse job, and I, black man, go down there and apply for the warehouse job, in reality, not in reality, in a make-believe world, you would give it to the best candidate, the candidate that is best for that position or most suited for that position. Male or female, doesn't matter. Don't get stuck on the gender. Hang in with the behavioral pattern. This is the job. These are the job requirements. Let's pick the candidate that is best suited for that particular job. But in the world that we are living in, they're not really picking the best candidate for the job all of the time. They're actually picking individuals based on a narrative, based on a quota, based on a token system. So when you, black female, go down there and compete for the exact same job, and I, black male, go down there and compete for the exact same job, chances are they're going to give it to you. They're going to give it to you so that they can meet the narrative's requirements. But they do know that you will quit. They do know that you're going to get fired. They do know you are not going to meet those requirements the long haul. So then why would they hire you if they know that you're not going to meet the requirements the long haul? Because the psyop is to make sure that the male does not keep economical power. So if he's not employed, can he get any income? Documented income. If it's harder for him to find a job, and both of you are trying to feed your families, and both of you are trying to get some money in the house, you're going to pretty much put the candidate or be in favor of the candidate that is more likely to bring in some income. Plus, they meet the requirement, the narrative requirement. Where we are having a problem with this conditioning stuff is because we're all trying to eat off the same plate. We're actually fighting each other over it without being sensible and saying, I know I got the job. over you because of the agenda. So since I got the job over you because of the agenda, male or female, let me tell you what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. Blase, blase, blah. I won't abandon you. I won't leave you. I won't do this, and I won't do that. We're not doing that. What we're doing is I got mine, you got to get yours. And we're not caring about what we do in the process to get it, or who we hurt, or who we step over. We're scrambling for scraps that we really don't have to scramble for, but it's an intent. Somebody has a different intent. Me, myself, and I have an intent to try to safeguard and keep as many people safe as possible. This is the reason for the videos, so it can reach as many people as possible and save as many people as possible who may not be aware of the trickery. But there are other people who don't want to save anybody. They just want to save themselves. So they're willing to get the job, and they're willing to do whatever they got to do to get the job, just simply so that they can have the job. Whereas I'm explaining, I want to get the job where I can save as many people as possible. So when I'm explaining to you classic conditioning, I'm hoping you understanding all of this talk is about getting you to understand why you are not pushing back, and hopefully you will understand that you can push back. You don't have to sit in the seat that you're sitting in. You can push back. Musical chairs. You can change your chairs. If you are afraid to confront them directly, personally, and you have every right to be, you can do it secretively. You can keep your mouth shut. You can make sure you teach your children what they're supposed to know, the history, the legacy, their heritage. You can make sure that you vote privately in the best interest of you and your people. You do not have to run out there and say, well, who do you vote for? Well, who do you vote for? Well, what party do you? You do not have to go out there and go, well, what is your favorite football team? What are your favorite rappers? You do not have to go out there and run your mouth. When people ask you what time it is, all you got to do is lie. I ain't into all that. And when you dumb down or when you act dumb, what that gives them is the mindset that, okay, let me not talk to this person because they're not aware of things. However, on the flip side, when you go down there and it's time for you to pass that test, or it's time for you to take that test, you must pass that test. This is what I'm explaining. So you don't have to be afraid to do the right thing. You have every right to be afraid to be identified or called out, because they're going to try to stop you, and you all aren't built for that. You all are not built for saying, fuck it, I'll take the hit. You guys aren't built like that. You guys are more or less built, well, he made me do it. Well, him right there. Well, what about him? Well, why I got to do this by myself? You didn't say nothing when it was so-and-so and so-and-so. That's how you guys are built. You guys are built cowardly. So the classic conditioning is to teach you can come out of it, because this is how you got here. You got here because your mama, your coward ass, your hoe ass mama, your coward ass daddy, and the environment. That's how you got there. And everybody in every system is making sure that you are not strong enough, brave enough, or cognizant enough to understand how to get out of it. Remember the Chinese finger cuffs? And they would ask you, you'll put your finger in here, and then the next thing you know, you couldn't pull your finger out of it. It was like a rolled up piece of paper, but you couldn't put your finger out of it. And then somebody had to show you how to get your finger out of it. Chinese handcuffs. What I'm saying to you is it's the same concept. Someone is keeping you here because they don't want you to push back. Your mother doesn't want you to push back. Your father doesn't want you to push back. Your grandparents don't want you to push back. Siblings don't want you to push back because they don't want the backlash. But you can push back. You can push back by doing whatever you got to do secretively. But just understand, when that pressure comes, when that test comes, you must pass that test. You must survive the pressure. Roll the tape.
Training fleas requires a glass jar with a lid. The fleas are placed inside the jar, and the lid is then sealed. They are left undisturbed for 3 days. Then, when the jar is opened, the fleas will not jump out. In fact, the fleas will never jump higher than the level set by the lid. Their behaviour is now set for the rest of their lives. And, when these fleas reproduce, their offspring will automatically follow their example. Training fleas requires a glass jar with a lid. The fleas are placed inside the jar and the lid is then sealed. They are left undisturbed for 3 days. Then, when the jar is opened, the fleas will not jump out. In fact, the fleas will never jump higher than the level set by the lid. Their behaviour is now set for the rest of their lives. And, when these fleas reproduce, their offspring will automatically follow their example.
Fleas in a jar, right? And once the lid is taken off of that jar, the fleas, the remaining offsprings of those fleas, and future offsprings of those fleas will not attempt to try to jump out the jar. I showed you also, guys, one time the water in the chimpanzee, where the first wave of chimpanzees tried to get that banana, and they would always get sprayed with the water hose. Then I also showed you within that video where, since they were getting sprayed with the water hose, they decided to leave the water hose on the banana alone because they thought the banana, attempting to go after the banana, was a bad thing. Then they brought in another batch of chimpanzees with some of the remaining old chimpanzees, or first experimental chimpanzees. And the first experimental chimpanzees, even though the water stopped running, the chimpanzees taught the new incoming chimpanzees that were not children, that were moderate adults or juveniles, that not to reach for the banana, so they would beat them down. Now here go another example of classic conditioning, where individuals who stem from an older system of thinking, feeling, and processing information are telling younger ones who have not went through that process how to behave, how to think, how to act, how to react, how to behave. What am I saying? In the last 55 to 56 years, most human beings that are living have not went through the era of Jim Crow. So your relationship to white folk should not be the equal or identical relationship to white folk as it pertains to those baby boomers from the civil rights era or civil rights or Black Power movement. However, the reason why many of you guys are afraid of white people, it's not simply because of the movies. It's not simply because of the way that they treat you in public. It's because of the baby boomers. They're the connect. They're the link. Drug dealers, gangbangers, all that other stuff, the degenerate class, they're still here. And they've taught their sons, they taught their daughters, they taught their grandchildren the violent ways that they used to be treated when corresponding with or enacting with white folk. So now you don't want to do this, and now you don't want to do that, and your sons don't want to work, and your daughters don't want to be good women. They don't want to be things that they are capable of being because they are afraid of the negative stereotypes or the negative backlash. When I tell you things, I'm trying to tell you guys without being biased. We know that they're still here. The remnants of that hate is still here. We know the legalities associated to that hate is still here. We know the policies are still here. So we know that you're not afraid of them physically. We know that. Your fear is fear of a loss of economics and jobs. So you're more compliant because you don't want nobody to interfere with your play. You're not afraid of them as it pertains to fist fights, being hit with a water hose or a brick. You will fight them back. Where your fear comes from is you are afraid of the economic backlash. But understand how I'm also trying to say it as far as an antidote or recovery is, you have to get over that fear. Not one people, not one side of town, not one city, not one state. All of you have to get over that backlash. Because unfortunately, we're at war. These immigrants are in this country and they are not going home. And the United States government, they may not let any more in, but the ones that are in are not going home. They're going to fast track these folks to citizenship. I live in Richmond, Virginia. This month alone, they've already started fast tracking them to their path of citizenship. So they came in illegally. Now they're holding classes. They're holding forums to help these immigrants become legal fast. If you guys don't understand the science of psychology, 1935, Carter G. Woodson wrote a book. What was the name of that book? The Miseducation of the Negro. In that book, which I do have, I have 2 copies of that book, which I do in that book, and it states, this is what he wrote in 1935, 32 or 1935, somewhere in that window. Sometimes dates escape me. If you can control a man's thinking, you don't have to worry about his actions. When you determine what a man shall think, you do not have to concern yourself about what he will do. If you make a man feel that he is inferior, you do not have to compel him to accept an inferior status. He will seek it himself. If you make a man think that he is justly an outcast, you do not have to order him to the back door. He will go without being told. And if there is no back door, his very nature will demand one. Yes, I read funny, but I'm trying to get you guys to understand the basic premise of what he's saying. If you can control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his action. When you determine what a man shall think, which is when you make him think something, you do not have to concern yourself about what he will do. If you make a man feel that he is inferior, you do not have to compel him to accept an inferior status, for he shall seek it himself. If you make a man think that he is justly an outcast, you not have to order him to the back door. He will go without being told. And if there is no back door, his very nature will demand one. Yes, play it back, you'll get what I'm getting at. It is the same thing with religion. It is the same thing with science. It's the same thing with all things on this earth, regardless the example. All of us are too young to actually know what was going on in the beginning. This is another reason why I don't like debates, and this is another reason why I don't actually yield myself to something. I try to teach you guys to follow the logic. The equation is 1 numerical symbol plus mathematical symbol, 1 numerical symbol, equal mathematical symbol. You should get 2. 1 plus 1 equals 2. The only thing I'm asking you guys to do, the listening audience, is keep the equation. Keep the format. The only thing you're going to take out is the numbers. 2 plus 2 should equal 4. 6 plus 6 should equal 12. That is the same. That's the equation. 1 plus 1 should equal 2. So whenever you add something to something, the number should expand. It shouldn't be whether you put this in there and you put that in there, and like say for instance 3 plus 2 will equal 7. 3 plus 2 does not equal 7, no matter how you slice it. So you got to figure out where you're going wrong. If I have 3 oranges and 5 apples, I should not have 7. If I have 3 oranges and 2 apples, I should not have 7. If I have 3 oranges and I have 2 apples, I should end up with 5. I'm not ending up with 5. So now I got to do an investigative study, root cause analysis, and I have to figure out why I'm not ending up with 5. And when I do all these words and when I do all this research, politics, yada, 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 I'm coming up with an underlining theme. And the number one underlining theme I'm coming up with is fear. The problem is, who holds the majority fear? Does the female hold the majority fear, or does the male hold the majority fear? By nature, you automatically know the female is going to hold the majority fear. But who's supposed to hold the least amount of fear? The male is supposed to hold the least amount of fear. But when you actually come out in real life, the men are equal or more or greater in fear as the female is. So if the men are supposed to be fighting for the best interests of future generations and fighting for some resources, fighting for some form of sustainability, you got to ask yourself, why are the men not fighting for some form of stability, some form of economics, some form of resources that they can control? And when I explain all of it to you, is the men have been, well, the whole community, but the men have been conditioned not to be men. The history is that it's this, that, and the third. You can't refute the timeline. The timeline doesn't lie. What I need you guys to focus on is why you're not jumping out of the jar. I need you guys to focus on, these are the steps you alter, combat, antidote, why your generation or you are not willing to jump out of the jar, even though the lid isn't there anymore. Your mother, your father, your grandmother, your grandfather, they had a legitimate reason. In the last 58 to 65 years, in the last 58 to 56 years, you haven't had a legitimate reason to stay in this rut. The boomers came along and they put poison in all of our ears. And they are the ones that are keeping us in this rut. Al Sharpton is a boomer. Clybourne is a boomer. Abrams is a boomer. Jackson is a boomer. Angela Davis is a known FBI informant when it was time, when she was a Panther. An informant. I'm having conversations with folks on the internet. Listen to my words. I'm having conversations with folks on the internet, and they're trying to fight and dispute whether or not if Sojourner Truth was a feminist. Please understand, I'm also having conversations about whether or not if Ice Cube's movie, The Next House Party, 3 or 4, whatever number it is, he wants to do Friday after next, or Friday after next Friday, whatever is next, the most recent Friday, Ice Cube. It posts online that Warner would not accept his movie for distribution. People in the comment section are sitting in the comment section talking about cast members and characters and who was funny and who was not funny, who was detrimental to the sales or to the movie, who was a contributing artist to the movie. They're talking about pros, cons of cast members and actors. All of that might be an ingredient. I can't take it out of the equation. But I'm always asking you guys, listening audience, cut to the chatter. Let's get to the meat and the potatoes of this. Why is Warner not accepting his movie? And those folks are not talking about the why they are not accepting the movie. They're getting distracted on minutia, small little things that are significant, but they're not as significant as it pertains to not getting a deal, not getting a contract, not getting a distribution. It don't work like that in business. In business, we the people, we decide if it's going to be good or bad. Just like with the relevance of this new Woman King. They're trying to promote this Woman King as if it's 2022 best movie of the year. On box office night, it came out. They said that the numbers did pretty good. Numbers aren't doing good anymore, and it's October the 5th. Numbers aren't doing any good. We, the people, the public, we determine whether or not if something is going to do good. Whether or not if a cast member or acting cast whether or not supporters or supporting actress or lead actor or whatever terms you want to get, it doesn't matter so much about the acting cast. It matters more about us. And if we go support it, it will do good. Whether or not if somebody was funny or somebody was not funny. So I'm trying to get the people to focus. Ask the question, why is Warner not accepting the movie? And then 2, are there any other distributors that will be able to distribute his movie? And then one guy said he needed to shop it to Tyler Perry. That's a solution to a problem. Talking about cast members and characters within the movie is irrelevant as it pertains to getting that movie in distribution so the public can see it and money can be made. But the same way that I explained to you guys, you speak stupid distractions, you guys do that when it comes to almost every topic associated to white people. You come up with some form of deterrent or some form of distraction or detractor to say, I ain't gonna do it. So you're the reasons why you're not jumping out of the jar. No matter how many times we try to get you to jump out of the jar, you have to jump out of the jar. Progress has to be made. Evolution, you cannot stop. And what I'm telling you is, it'd be better if you try to control it, some form of it, versus it coming out of left field. Pop Goes the Weasel. How do you like me now? Instead of you getting ahead of it, all of you have heard my videos enough. I'm preventative maintenance. I see the storm coming. I see what's going on. So I'm going to try to get ahead of it. I'm going to try to get ahead of it, not necessarily so I can break out like a lottery winner, but more or less so it doesn't disrupt this part of my life. And what it seems like is, even though me, she, her, him, them, we try to get you guys this information, you guys are just too afraid. It's not the information. It's proven itself too many times. You guys are afraid. It's the same concept that Lyndon Baines Johnson once said. This is what Lyndon Baines, I got him. I keep trying to explain to you guys. Not necessarily that I got him like I got notes. I do have notes. But more or less not in my head, because they're not in my head. They're notes. I've heard it so many times that I know where to go get it from. Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ, said, these Negroes, they're getting pretty uppity these days. And that's a problem for us since they've got something now that they never had before. The political pull to back up their uppityness. That is what they have now that they never had before. The political pull to back up their uppityness. Now, continuing on with this quote. Now we've got to do something about this. We've got to give them a little something, just enough to quiet them down. Not enough to make a difference. I'll have these niggers voting Democratic for the next 200 years. This is what he wrote. This is what he's famous for, quote. Whether it be real or not, they're going to give it to him. So when someone uses this quote moving forward, he is still going to be the bearer of that quote. Even if it's made up, they're going to put his face and name on it. He never said that. It's not about that. Listen to the talking points. These N-words, they're getting pretty uppity these days. And that's a problem for us since they've got something now that they've never had before. The political pull to back up their uppityness. Now we've got to do something about this. We've got to give them a little something, just enough to quiet them down, not enough to make a difference. I'll have these N-words voting Democrat for the next 200 years. You need to understand why things are going on the way they are, so repetitive. You need to understand why you're not able to come out of the pattern. You need to understand why it's so effective even after all these years. And the majority of the people are not here. You are being conditioned. You have been conditioned. I explained to you coward gene. I'm talking about what is this thing called that I'm talking about? Conditioning, classic conditioning. All of these are things to make you fear them, even on a minute level when they're not around. And they use members of your own tribe to push the fear. I am not an individual that's trying to push the fear. I'm an individual that's trying to awaken you. You are not ready and you are not prepared to stand toe to toe, to go blow for blow, to last round for round with them. You're not at that level. So what I am telling you is get off of that. What you need to be working on right now is self-improvement. You need to be working on your money. You need to be working on your education. You hear me telling you, stop putting that female on the list. You need to understand why you must stop putting that female on the list. All those videos about how these females think about you, stop being dismissive. The female does not think about you the way that you thinks about her. The black man is the only male on this planet that has a godlike resemblance. He is the only male. I don't want to keep dropping these things to you guys and you guys don't quite understand. You have every right to dismiss it. Nah, that ain't it. I disagree. You have every right to disagree. But what you're going to have to do after your disagreement is you can't go do a weekend study and then come back on Monday and say I'm a PhD. If me, we, she, her, them, us are telling you, nah, we're out of order. We're out of order because of the arrangement is out of order. And if PhDs that I'm learning up under are teaching me the order, you can't come out here and 3 days later and be a PhD when these men and women have been doing it for 60, 70, 100 years. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't even communicate with you. I would try to ask you the simple questions: who you is, what your name is, what are you interested in? I keep the conversation very vague. The questions will be very vague. I just want to know where you at. But I'm not here to debate. I'm not here to argue. I will allow you to say your point, say your 2 cents, and I'll leave it at that. I'm not here to debate people. Those days are over. I'm here to get work done. So when we make statements and you disagree, you have every right to disagree. But you're going to have to do the research to figure out which is the best path our people must take. So I don't come to you with the knowledge or the wisdom or the understanding of preaching fear. Everything is about self-improvement. Everything is about you're the key. As a man, you're the key. You're going to work longer than her. You're going to work harder than her. You're going to be more accurate than her. Everything about it is you. You're going to do all the heavy lifting. You're not going to be the only one that's going to do the heavy lifting. You're going to do the majority of the lifting. And if you're going to be the one making the sacrifice, if you're going to be the one doing all of that special, nice, pretty words, then you have to stage the environment where you get the most maximum outcome of that environment. The most maximum outcome cannot keep going to the females or males who don't put in the most amount of work. We have to change that narrative. These people are getting participation trophies after we do all of the hard work. Michael Jordan and whoever, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, I'm not saying that they did all of the hard work, but they did the majority of the work. While the members on the bench, they got a ring, even though they're no names. In some aspects, that makes sense. But we as the male, we're dying the most. We're suffering the most. Even if she does get it, we have to be able to get something in turn on this planet. Now, not in paradise. I don't speak that paradise talk. So when I say you're not able to jump up out of the jar, these are just examples so that you could understand why you are scared of failing. These are examples of why you have a misunderstanding when you go down there to the voting booth. You're not able to vote in your best interest. Everybody has conditioned you. Everybody has taught you. Everybody has instilled in you not to go full measure. Everybody. So when I come along and I try to awaken your spirit or try to awaken that fighter in you, I do expect some pushback. What I don't expect is an attack. I don't expect the attack. I don't appreciate the attack, and I don't want the attack. I expect for you to go do the research. Instead of voting for your best interest in 3 months, in 2 months, and in 3 weeks, why don't you study for a whole solid year? 365 to 365, so you can get a better understanding of why you are voting for this particular candidate and or why you are voting for this particular party. And you come and tell me I'm voting just because my mama used to vote. Nah, I don't want to hear that. I'm voting because that's how I always voted. I got it. But what has it done for you? Switch your style up. You're never supposed to be loyal to one thing. You guys aren't even loyal to one religion. And now all of a sudden you want to be loyal to one political party? You guys got to jump over this glass jar. You guys got to get past your fears. You just got to wake up. We're trying to wake you up. Get out of the glass jar. Disregard the lessons that your mammy and your daddy told you. They're not serving you, moving you forward. Warrior class, zoo, rise up. Warrior class, zoo, show up. Warrior class, zoo, speak up. Warrior class, zoo, smoke them out. Peace, blessings, and black love.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
In this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
Fair Use Act disclaimer. This site is for educational purposes only. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research.